Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing today? Yeah? Lunches, good lunches happening out here? Yeah? It's good. So, as we were introduced, we are all here from the Wheeling Symphony, our brass quintet. And so what we want to do is, interestingly enough, all of us either regularly play with or have played with a brass band in Pittsburgh called the River City Brass Band. That has been around since 1981, and it was formed when the conductor who founded it, Matt, went to, okay, thank you. That was founded when the founding conductor decided to do extensive research into the British brass band culture and decided to bring that to Pittsburgh. He was actually a professor, I think at IUP at the time, if anyone remembers right. And he took, I think, a sabbatical and went to England and lived there for a whole semester, essentially, really learning the brass band culture in that country. And it's interesting, we're talking about this backstage, thinking, how do we end up, like brass bands in general really do tend to come from military band playing, okay? And the instrument structure of like high instruments, middle voice instruments, low voice instruments is the exact same as what you would have in a military ensemble. So the brass band is though kind of an outflow of Britain having such a huge colony at some point. You'll see brass bands in Africa, you'll see brass bands in India, you'll see brass bands in Australia, and we have them here in the US. So it's like this continuing tradition. So it does definitely come out of military playing, but it also really, especially in Britain, and from what I was hearing here, did I hear that there were 60 in this area total back in the 80s?
That's how many has found so far.
So that really brings home the point that the brass band was really a community group. Okay, and one of the really interesting things, do we have anybody in here that are musicians that read music and play music? Yeah. So most of you know that if you've seen music written, we have two general, you have the treble clef and bass clef. Usually low brass instruments read the bass clef, but in brass band music, especially British brass band music, almost all the instruments are written in treble clef, which would be very strange to give a tuba player a part that is written in a different way that they would normally write it. But this was really designed to be utilitarian, so that if one of the tuba players was missing, one of the cornet players or another member of the group could just move over and read the part and cover the part. So it was really designed as a community thing and not a truly professional ensemble. So there's a really deep connection between brass bands and their community. It's really interesting that there were that many just in this region. So we're going to play some music for you today from that time period of when these cornet bands and the brass bands were really thriving in this area, and that'll be kind of in the right around the Civil War, post-Civil War era. And we're going to start with part of a suite of some songs that would have been popular during the Civil War era. Okay, and the first one we're playing is called the Signal March, followed by, I can't remember what the next one is. Ellen Dean Quickstep, and then the third one we'll play, I think everybody will recognize, and we'll need to need an introduction for that one.
So, is this thing on?
No, oh, you might have to switch it on. Let's just switch it on, right? Let's see if this is switched toward the bottom. It's on there.
Oh, it is. Okay. All right. So this little instrument here, you might notice there's a size difference. In fact, there's really 3 different size cornets here. There's this little one called an E-flat trumpet. A little bigger one that's the yellow brass one there. That's a C. I said trumpet. It's a cornet. A C cornet, and then that's a B-flat cornet. I don't know if you can see the difference in size from where you are, but each one has its own purpose. The C cornet is probably the one that doesn't quite belong in a Civil War era brass band, because these were all kind of designed to be in a certain key and a certain register. So in other words, register meaning how high or how low the instrument plays. And this was just designed to really be the melody instrument. So it was all the people that were seeking glory to play all the melodies on the E-flat cornet, which is perfect for me. But the thing about the cornet that's really peculiar and important, most of you will know a trumpet, much more than you'll know a cornet. Generally, trumpets are longer. Cornets are wound a little bit tighter. The curves are a little bit more gentle, if you can see here. There's this thing, it's called a shepherd's crook. I don't know if you can see it just as it leads to the bell. Kind of a pretty little curve there. And that's designed to have fewer straight lines and fewer bends, fewer 90-degree turns in the instrument, and that makes it sound, that's part of what makes it sound a little prettier, a little rounder. It's not quite as able to play loudly, but it's usually able to play a little more smoothly. The other really important difference is that this instrument is conical as opposed to cylindrical. So if you think about the shape of a cone, it starts narrow at the top and then widens out. And a cylinder, of course, is the same diameter throughout. So that refers not to the bell, which is what you might be thinking, but to the tubing on the instrument. So when you start the mouthpiece, the diameter of the tubing is narrower. And as it moves out through the instrument, it gets wider and wider. Now, I don't really know this for a fact, but it makes perfect sense. This is what I've sussed out about it, that the air, in effect, would slow down as it goes through this instrument, just like a river, when it widens out, slows down. So that has a peculiar and specific effect to the sound, mainly making it warmer and prettier, I suppose. So this is the E-flat again, the C cornet, and the B-flat cornet. They'll talk, I'm sure, a little bit about how the instruments, maybe a little bit later we can do that, how their instruments are similar and different. The next piece we're going to play is something also from the Civil War era, and from what would have been America's greatest songwriter of the time. You can think of him as maybe Billy Joel, or if you want to go back to Richard Rodgers or somebody like that, or Irving Berlin, maybe the Irving Berlin of his time. Stephen Foster is from Pittsburgh, of course, and wrote so many tunes that are really part of the American songbook. This is a little song called "The Beautiful Dreamer." Now, we're not going to play this really in the style of a Civil War band, but I think you'll get the idea. It's a very pretty little piece, "Beautiful Dreamer." I promise you, there's only a little bit of spit. It's mostly just condensation.
Okay, so this is an instrument that you would not find in a brass band, actually. This is a French horn, and so this is an instrument that you would see in concert bands, you'd see in orchestras, brass quintets like this, but you would not see this in a military band. In a military band, you would have an E-flat alto horn, which would kind of look so. Sam, a little bit later, will talk about the tuba, and then a little bit of a smaller version of the tuba would be a baritone or a euphonium, and then a smaller version than that would be an E-flat alto horn. The bell would play face up, and it has piston valves. You might not be able to see unless you're right up front, but this has what's called rotor valves. So instead of a piston where you push down and it changes the tubes that are open or closed, this has a rotor that turns inside of it. This is also a conical instrument, and if I stretch this out, it would be 12 feet long. It's actually the same length as a tuba in F, but it's just much smaller diameter of the bore. So it has, we have the same range, but the horn players tend to play higher in the register. Not that the tuba can't, but it just has a different tone in the upper register on the horn than it does on the tuba. So, and I was referencing the River City group. That group, while it does have roots in the British brass band tradition, never used the E-flat alto horns. So the French horn would be something that you normally wouldn't see in a classic brass band, British style or Civil War style. But not that many people specialize in playing E-flat horns, and horn players really also don't like playing them all that much. So whenever we get to say like, oh, we'll just play French horn instead, we're happier with that. But historically accurately, you would not have seen this instrument, even though it was being played in orchestras and operas and all over the place at the time of the brass bands. You would not have seen this in a brass band. All of our instruments function in a very similar way here. The trumpets and cornets were really used as a military instrument, signaling. That's why the first thing we played here from the Civil War brass band suite is a signal march. You hear these da-da-da, these kind of fanfare things. So the trumpets and cornets were really used as a directional instrument, straightforward to signal things. The horn was really developed in Europe as a hunting instrument. So if you just look at this and imagine all these coils and tubes in the middle not being there, it looks like the Christmas tree ornament we're used to seeing, okay, with a big hoop and a big bell on the end. Well, if you imagine this hoop being a lot bigger, not quite the size of a hula hoop, but somewhere not too far off, you could put it over your shoulder while you were riding a horse and take it off, and the players would play with the bell up on their arm like that to signal that, okay, the fox we're hunting for is over here, go this way, So the horn was really designed as a hunting instrument, still signaling, but not militaristically. Interestingly enough, you're familiar with the phrase tally-ho, British phrase tally-ho. Well, that actually comes out of the French tradition of hunting horns. And so the horn players, you would hear this sound, it would almost be like this. Okay, it kind of sounds like we're missing a note, but it's actually a signal that they called tai-yo, and that meant go forward. So that actually translated into the British phrase that we still use now, tally-ho. So there's a little bit of trivia for you if that ever comes up on Jeopardy. But so we're going to move on now, and we're going to play a march by a composer that you would probably, I know most of us probably have never heard of. Drew, did you want to say something about this composer at all? I can't remember. You mentioned it.
There's not a whole lot I can say. He was born in 1812, and he lived for 68 years. But it turns out he was one of the most popular composers of that time. It was just that his music really didn't survive. Most of it was regimental or military music, and so he was kind of a contemporary of Stephen Foster at that time. But there was sort of like one was in the band music spectrum, and then Stephen Foster was in the songwriting spectrum. And but anyway, it's a nice little march. Did you say that it's called Washington Grapes?
Oh, and the composer is Claudio Grafullo. Sorry. Yeah.
So before we play the next tune, there's one other instrument rather, that I have in front of me that I thought I'd show you. Many of you might remember a guy named Chuck Mangione. He was kind of popular in the 70s, maybe 80s a little bit. Probably his most famous song was "Feels So Good," right? All the young people liked that music back in those days. I think it was great stuff. But this instrument is actually much older than that. It was developed by the same person that developed the saxophone, a man named Adolf Sax. He developed both a family of brass instruments and a family of woodwind instruments. And they were all designed with the same kind of formula. Where I spoke of the smaller to larger, all the way from the top to the bottom of the group. This has the same thing. So in a sense, this becomes the soprano tuba. This is sort of the soprano tuba, if you think about it. It's also a conical instrument, but as you can see, it's much larger. Looks maybe a bell closer to the size of a trombone than a trumpet. And it gives it a much more mellow sound. It's actually quite a bit featured on this next little piece. It's an arrangement of a piece by Scott Joplin, which you might expect anything by Scott Joplin to have a sort of a jaunty, sunny feel to it. This is just something very beautiful. We discovered it a few years ago playing on another concert with a larger brass ensemble, actually with River City Brass. And I I was so taken by how pretty the melody was, and I hope you'll enjoy it too. So this is Scott Joplin's Bethina Waltz. I think I will turn that thing on.
I'm Sebastian Vera, and it's a real pleasure to play for everyone today. It's just such a nice way to start the day, and it's so great to see so many people here. So I play what's called the trombone. It's originally from the word tromba, which means large trumpet, big trumpet. I like to interpret it as better trumpet. We've had enough trumpet talk. How many did you bring? Jeez. Okay, so the trombone, obviously, what's unique about it is what we call a slide. We're not smart enough to understand how to push down all those buttons, so we just have this long thing. But you have to play by ear a little bit and know where everything goes. We have what's called seven positions, and each position has a harmonic series. So in each one of these 7 places I put my trombone, I can play a series of notes. In each one, and sometimes there's multiple notes, there can be other ones, but you kind of get used to that after a while. But yeah, it originated a little later than most instruments. You started to see its predecessor actually named the sack butt, S-A-K-B-U-T. It was a smaller version around the 15th century, we saw that. But it mainly rose to prominence in churches and liturgical music in 16th century, 17th century, because it has just such a vocal quality. A lot of people say it's one of the closest instruments to the male tenor voice. And if you've ever had a chance to hear a trombone choir, it's one of the most beautiful sounds when you can hear like 20 trombones playing together in a church. It's a really beautiful thing. But yeah, this is the trombone. So the next piece we are going to be playing is The Entertainer by Scott Joplin. I think you'll recognize it. I hope it's entertaining.
Hopefully you're all hungry for ice cream now. I know I am. My name is Sam Lucci. Happy to be here. Great to see everybody. Just want to say a few words about the tuba. The tuba is absolutely the baby instrument of the group. It actually just a few days ago celebrated its 187th birthday. It was patent was filed in 1835, and believe it or not, that's quite a bit younger than the rest of the instruments. The Sebastian said the sackbut has existed since the 15th century. So, well, if you think about it, the whole tradition of the brass band really couldn't be complete without a bass instrument. So it really didn't exist until the tuba was invented, if you think about it, right? Because they had to have a variety of wind instruments, not purely brass. So I like to think of this as the sort of the puzzle piece that completes the brass band picture. So, and that patent that was filed is really not a whole lot different than what I have today. It uses valves that are very similar to the piston valves. It's keyed in F, which is similar to how the French horn works today. This one's a little different. It's an E flat, which is a traditional band instrument today. It's basically just an octave lower than the trombone, which was an octave lower than the cornet or trumpet, or soprano tuba / flugelhorn, as Drew described. And this is also conical. In fact, you can kind of see how the bore slightly gets bigger the whole way around. You can kind of see it. Probably more pronounced on this than the other instruments. So yeah, everybody on stage has a conical instrument except for the trombone. That's cylindrical, and I think that's also pretty evident in the way it looks as well. So, and hopefully the way it sounds. So, all right, we're going to play just a few tunes that are from sort of the early American songbook, songs that were really popular in 1900, 1902, and I think we're going to start with "She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain."
Okay, so I think we're just about on time. We have one more piece to play for you here. But we would definitely want to say thank you for for your. It's so nice to play for so many people today and be part of this weekly club that you have. It's really very cool. If I had something like this close to where I live, I would go to it all the time. This is really, really pretty cool to just get together and learn But thank you for inviting us in, and we're very happy to play. Hopefully we'll see some of you in just down the street at the Capitol to see some shows of us. In a couple weeks we have some really cool stuff we're doing with Yo-Yo Ma, and some really fun things going on this whole series, or season. But it's kind of interesting. So the last thing we're going to play for you is also, some of the books, the last couple of tunes that we've been playing are from a book of just popular American songs from the turn of the 20th century, okay? And the front of it has a picture of a gazebo on it. So you can imagine a lot of these songs you would hear on kind of like a hazy summer day in a band playing in a gazebo. Okay, and that's a lot of the culture of this kind of playing too, like bringing the community together to listen. But interestingly enough, in 2021, at the University of Pittsburgh, there's during their lunch hour, they have a student council that gets different groups to come in and play. For students, they can come in and leave as they're eating and just hang out for a little bit and hear what people are doing. They have all kinds of different people to do that. So a brass quintet from the River City Brass went and played that. And we played for a little more than an hour and played all kinds of different tunes. But even with 19 and 20-year-olds in 2021, the tune Bill Bailey got the biggest applause from all of them, even though it's 120-some years old or more, okay? So that's we'll finish with this. And thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for inviting us. We're very happy to play with you.